Be nice. Don't make such a fuss about it. These aren't just friendly suggestions, they're tools of social control. And today we're going to unpack how being nice became sort of a cage and why wild kindness might be our key to breaking free. I'm your host, Jennifer, and as someone who spent years thinking kindness meant making myself smaller in every kind of way, this episode is deeply personal. When was the last time you felt guilty for setting a boundary? Or when did you last apologize for saying no? If you're exhausted from being everyone's emotional support human, from carrying the invisible load of keeping the peace, this episode is for you. Drawing from Bell Hooks' radical vision of love and Bourdieu's understanding of power, we're about to explore how kindness became domesticated in a world that's trying to sell us niceness as another productivity metric. More importantly, we'll discover how to let our kindness run wild again. Come closer, you fellow perfectionists and people pleasers. Get comfortable, get your favorite beverage, and let's do this. There's a different way to think about mental health, and it starts with slowing down. Sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home, and that's exactly why we're taking the Scenic route. Hi, I'm Jennifer Walter, host of the Scenic Route podcast. Think of me as your sociologist, sister in arms, and rebel with many causes. Together, we're blending critical thinking with compassion, mental health with a dash of rebellion, and personal healing with collective change. We're trading perfectionism for possibility and toxic positivity for messy growth. Each week, we're exploring the path to better mental health and social transformation. And yes, by the way, pretty crystals are totally optional. You ready to take the Scenic route? Let's walk this path together. So let's start with something provocative here. Society has weaponized kindness against women for centuries. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar. You've heard those like, be nice, don't make such a fuss about it, think of others. And I'm so sure they sound as familiar to me as they do to you. And the thing is, and this is something I want you to understand. These are not just friendly suggestions. They're tools of social control. They're part of what Bell Hooks refers to as the imperialist, white, supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Basically, a system that requires women's emotional labor to function while devaluing that very labor. I mean, otherwise we would get like fancy ideas of that actually wanting to get paid for the emotional labor we do. So these expectations are ingrained with us. We're growing up with them. If you're growing up as a woman in Western society, it kind of makes you responsible for everyone's emotional well-being except your own. And this weaponization of kindness, for lack of a better word, it kind of operates through what sociologist Pierre Bourdieu calls symbolic violence. Right? The way power maintains itself through our own internalized beliefs. Like we don't actually, most of the time, we're not even conscious of those, right? We've been conditioned to believe that kindness means making ourselves smaller, quieter, and generally like more palatable or just more beige. We've learned that to be kind means to be constantly available, eternally patient, endlessly giving, like an endless fucking well of kindness that's just going, and does not need, without any need for replenishing. And that is a big part of why so many women feel emotionally exhausted, feel the heavy burden of mental load. And we must ask ourselves, but hey, what if there is another way to be kind? What if we can redefine what kindness means? What if kindness could be fierce instead of tame, boundaried, caged instead of boundless? Or could it feel liberating instead of constraining? And this is where kind of like, for the past couple of days, I'm playing with the concept of wild kindness. That's a working title. Don't give me hate for it, but I still kind of like it. And it's not a rejection of kindness. Not at all. I firmly believe my operating policy is to be fiercely kind, but not to all kindness. And what if we can, with this new concept or this emerging of wild kindness, like, can we like reclaim its true nature? Because when I talk about wild kindness, I talk about liberation, right? Because as your on-call sociologist, I always want you to think about who profits. Where does the money go, right? Who profits when we believe that kindness means constant availability? Who gains power when we exhaust ourselves trying to be perfectly nice and palatable? Who profits? And this brings me to a very uncomfortable truth. Many of us, especially women, non-binary folks, and other marginalized people, and of course this is even more true for women in different intersections, like marginalized women of color, for example. We've been conditioned to view kindness as a form of survival, right? How many times, I know from my personal story, there were many instances where I choose kindness as a form of survival, right? For example, that very creepy dude who was sitting right next to me in an empty train. I mean, what, man, why are you doing this? Anyway, whole fucking train empty. He sits right next to me, of course, starts yabbing. And there are different scenarios going through my head. One would be just like, just shut up. And I kind of like went with general kindness of like kind firmly, but kindly letting him down and just kind of like, why don't you like move along, buddy? Or as we say in German, Gang mit Gott aber Gang, like go with God, but go. Roughly translated. Right? So kindness as a form of survival has many, many different forms. And I'm sure if you reflect on your behavior in the past, you will find instances where you did that. And this has nothing to do with blame. We're not blaming anyone here on the scenic route. It's just to become more self-aware. So we've learned to be kind, right? Before being honest. We've learned to be pleasant before being authentic, right? All the times my mom put me in, I don't know, cutesy dresses and sweaters and whatnot, like, that wasn't me. That was just, I don't know, me being more presentable for Christmas. So also, like, yes, I said, like, to be pleasant before being authentic, to be helpful before being whole. There is a sociologist called Arlie Hochschild who broadly refers to this as emotional labor. The invisible work of managing not just your own feelings, but everyone else's. Also, like, another great thing about being a woman in this society. But seriously, like, here's where wild kindness becomes revolutionary. If we see it as a tool that just refuses to be a tool of oppression. With wild kindness, we say, I can be fierce and compassionate. And it absolutely 100% acknowledges that saying no can be an act of kindness to ourselves and ultimately to others too. There is no kindness if you're just saying yes for the sake of it. There's no true benefit for the greater good. I truly believe this. So maybe this could also tie in with what Bell Hooks wrote when she wrote love as the practice of freedom, kindness that liberates us rather than constraints. Like, just consider how often women and marginalized people are called difficult or harsh or, oh, that's so bold of you, so brave, when they simply state their needs, their desires, what they want. So this is something that Pierre Bourdieu calls doxa. doxas are the unwritten rules that seem natural, but actually serve power structures. They are kind of like society's taken for granted, unquestioned truths. Like things are just the way they are. And think about how like perfectionism intersects with this. How many of us have tried to be the perfect kind person to avoid like these labels? So when we start questioning the expectations of kindness, we begin to see the deeper patterns of how society maintains control, right? Think about your last boundary setting moment when you set the line in the sand and we're like, no more. This is it. This is the line. This is the fucking line. And you stood up, you stood your ground, and you took care of yourself. How was it received? Because here's a pattern that often reveals itself in situations like this. Women and marginalized people are routinely called difficult or harsh or all the things. Difficult to work with. Oh, she must be on your period. All these derogatory terms when they simply state their needs and stand up for themselves. And this reflex of getting called difficult or harsh or bold or all these things, it's not coincidental, right? It happens too often to be that anyway, but it's also not, right? Like Bourdieu, you can look at again to Pierre Bourdieu and his what he calls doxas. Doxas are unwritten rules that seem natural but actually serve power structures, right? These rules are so deeply embedded in our culture that we rarely question them, or that we like rarely question them because we're not aware of them. And so to believe that a kind woman never says no, or that a good woman is always available to take care of you emotionally, physically. So when that is the belief, then setting a boundary is somewhat selfish. And we hardly ever question this, right? This is so ingrained in us. It's and also for a lot of us who have a perfectionist streak, takes one to know one. If perfectionism enters the equation, this system is getting even more fucked, right? How many of us have tried to be the perfect kind woman, specifically to avoid labels like difficult or harsh? Like there's a philosopher called Sandra Bartke who refers to this as psychological oppression. The internalized belief that our worth depends on our palatability to others. So we end up policing ourselves, making ourselves smaller, all in the name of being kind, being a good woman, being a kind woman. So how can we reframe this? What if our difficult boundaries are actually acts of courage? What if our harsh self-advocacy is actually modeling healthy relationship to others? And okay, this is getting bell hooks, very heavy on the bell hooks, but I mean, it is true, right? Like the moment she says, the moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination. And so wild kindness are fierce acts of love with the important distinction of we love ourselves first fiercely, and then we radiate that love outwards because we have to. That's another downside of late stage neoliberalism and capitalism, that our well-being hardly ever radiates into our communities, which it absolutely has to. But we're probably gonna save this for another time. So where does this leave us with wild kindness? Maybe with some words of wisdom, some words of encouragement that your worth isn't measured by how much you deplete yourself for others, that the expectation of endless emotional labor isn't kindness, it's actually oppression. So maybe wild kindness could look like saying no without over-explaining. Just say no. It's a complete sentence. Maybe it looks like allowing your anger to coexist with your compassion. We have no room for toxic positivity here. you have to build a capacity to hold all emotions. You cannot just hold good emotions. Capacity works both ways. While kindness could also look like refusing to tone police yourself to others, making yourself smaller. I don't know. Wear the bold sweater, wear the bold colors, wear the makeup, wear the perfume if you want to. Take up space. Say what you really mean during a meeting. While kindness also looks like acknowledging that rest is a form of resistance, or understanding that your boundaries honor both yourself and others. Maybe each time you practice wild kindness, each time you honor your needs alongside others, you're not just being kind. You're participating in outlaw culture. Again, with the bell hooks, I mean, shoot me, feel free. But she's perfect for this topic. Seriously, guys, she is. So creating new ways of being that challenge, creating new ways of like changing dominant paradigms. You're showing others, especially the next generation, if you have kids, or basically everyone around you, that kindness doesn't have to be a cage. Kindness is a fucking strength. And it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to be fiercely kind and not to owe kindness. So maybe for a closing reflection, start noticing when your kindness feels like what Bourdieu calls cultural capital. Something you must trade to belong. When do you have to be kind in order to belong or gain access to a group, to a role, to something in your life? Or when it feels like power? When does it feel like choice versus an obligation? When does it feel liberating, or when does it feel like freedom versus control? Like, take a few moments and reflect on that, or go for a walk and reflect on that. Because remember, your kindness is a force, not a favor. It's not a performance for patriarchal approval. It's not a down payment, right, on your right to exist. You don't owe it. Kindness, it's wild and free, and it's beautiful, and it's fierce, and it's yours to define. So with that, this has been this episode on the Scenic Rep podcast. I'd say until next time, stay wild, stay kind. And remember, like, when the world tries to domesticate your compassion, maybe letting your kindness run wild and fierce. Maybe it's the most revolutionary thing you can do. And just like that, we've reached the end of another journey together on the Scenic Route podcast. Thank you for spending time with us. Curious for more stories or in search of the resources mentioned in today's episode? Visit us at scenicroutepodcast.com for everything you need. And if you're ready to embrace your scenic route, I've got something special for you. Step off the beaten path with my Scenic Route Affirmation card deck. It's crafted for those moments when you're seeking courage, yearning to trust your inner voice, and eager to carve out a path authentically, unmistakably yours. Pick your Scenic Route Affirmation today and let it support you. Excited about where your journey might lead? I certainly am. Remember, the Scenic Route is not just about the destination, but the experiences, learnings, and joy we discover along the way. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the Scenic Route again.